Commander Lisa Frost stood tall despite feeling small. The massive amphitheater of the Galactic Concordat headquarters stretched around her in a perfect circle. Representatives from 50 alien species filled the seats. Their eyes, some glowing, some blinking, some not eyes at all but sensing organs, all focused on her. Worse, they'd all seemed amused. The Zithran ambassador, Krizoth, towered over Lisa on the central platform. His gray skin glistened under the bright lights. All four of his eyes blinked one after another. Lisa had learned this meant he found something funny. "And here," Krizoth said, his voice booming through translation devices, "we see the human military vessel Dauntless attempting to evade Concordat patrol ships near the Proxima colony." The giant screen behind them showed an Earth ship exploding in a bright flash. Lisa kept her face still, fighting the anger inside her. That ship had carried 300 people, people she had known. "Your weapons are primitive," Krizoth continued. "Your shields cannot withstand even our lightest attacks. Your fastest ships are slower than our cargo vessels." With each word, laughter rippled through the audience. Lisa glanced to her right, where Lieutenant Jack Palmer stood guard. His face showed nothing, but she saw his hand tighten on his ceremonial weapon. Jack was good at hiding his feelings, but Lisa knew him well. He was angry too. "Your species had such promise," Ambassador Krizoth said, his four eyes blinking in sequence again. "But you simply lack the brain power to compete in space. The Concordat Council has voted. Earth and its remaining colonies will be placed under our protection." Protection. The word burned in Lisa's mind. It meant Earth would become little more than a zoo. Humans would be studied, managed, and contained. From the upper levels of the amphitheater, a representative of the Drovian species leaned forward. His long neck extended as he spoke. "We are particularly interested in the water moons of your Jupiter. Perhaps once Earth is properly supervised, we might negotiate for mining rights." More laughter filled the room. No one even pretended this was a fair meeting anymore. Lisa stepped forward. The platform automatically adjusted, raising her so she could look the Zithran in his lower set of eyes. "The United Earth government appreciates the Concordat's concern," she said in a calm voice she did not feel. "However, we must decline your offer of protection. Earth and its colonies remain sovereign territory." Krizoth made a sound like stones grinding together. Lisa's translator indicated this was the Zithran version of a chuckle. "Commander Frost, this is not an offer. The vote has been taken. In 3 standard months, the protection field will be activated around your solar system. For your own good, of course." Lisa maintained eye contact. "We request time to consult with our government." "Granted," Krizoth said with a dismissive wave of his upper limb. "Though the outcome will not change." As the assembly began to break up, Jack moved closer to Lisa. "They're going to lock us in our own solar system," Lisa whispered. Jack's eyes scanned the room, noting which species seemed most pleased by the announcement. "The Drovians want our resources. The Zithrans want our planets. None of them think we can stop them." Lisa turned away from the departing aliens. "Has the secure channel to Earth been established?" Jack nodded. "Ready when you are." "Tell them," Lisa said quietly. "Tell Earth that Mockingbird Protocol is a go." Jack's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure? Once we activate that." "They leave us no choice," Lisa interrupted. "They think we're harmless. Let them keep thinking that. For now." Jack moved away to send the message. Lisa watched the aliens laughing and talking, already dividing up humanity's future among themselves. They had no idea what was coming. 3 years earlier, deep underground in the Nevada desert, Chief Engineer Alan Westfield slammed his hand on the table. The holographic display above it flickered. "It won't work," he said. "The energy needs are too great. We can't hide a ship that big." Across the table, Admiral Nancy Klein crossed her arms. Her gray uniform was spotless, her white hair pulled back tight. "We need to find a way, Alan. The Zithrans grow bolder every day. 3 colonies lost already." The room was cold and windowless, buried a mile beneath the surface. Only 10 people in the world knew it existed. Only 5 knew what they were building here. Alan pointed at the ship design floating above the table. Look at the math. To bend light around it, we need power. To block sensors, we need more power. To keep the crew alive while doing both. Impossible. Admiral Klein pressed a button on her wrist device. The door to the lab slid open. A woman walked in wearing a simple white lab coat. She had dark hair streaked with silver and deep lines around her eyes. Dr. Olivia Martinez, Admiral Klein said, our new head of quantum physics. Alan frowned. With respect, Admiral, we need engineering solutions, not theoretical physics. Olivia stepped forward without speaking. She reached into the hologram and expanded a section of the ship. With quick gestures, she modified the design. The power requirements displayed on the side of the image began to drop rapidly. What are you doing? Alan asked, leaning closer. Changing the problem, Olivia said. Her voice was soft but confident. You're trying to hide the ship. I'm making it not exist. Admiral Klein smiled slightly. Dr. Martinez has been working on quantum entanglement for the past decade. In secret, Olivia continued adjusting the design. We can create a pocket dimension, a small fold in spacetime. The ship doesn't reflect light or emit energy because, in a very real sense, it isn't there. Alan stared at the new design. That's not possible. It is, Olivia said. I've already built a working prototype. It can only hide a baseball for 30 seconds, but the principle is sound. Admiral Klein walked around the table. The Concordat thinks we're primitive. They think we're decades away from quantum manipulation. They don't guard their secrets well because they don't believe we can understand them. She tapped another control. A new image appeared, alien technical documents, translated into English. 3 months ago, one of our deep cover agents recovered these from a Zithran research facility. They'd been studying quantum displacement for years, but gave up because they couldn't solve the energy problem. Olivia smiled. But I have. Ellen wasn't convinced. Even if this works, and that's a big if, we'd need a crew willing to test it. If the displacement field fails while they're in it, they'd appear instantly in enemy territory, Admiral Klein finished. I know. That's why this is all voluntary. She brought up another image, a sleek black ship unlike any Earth vessel Alan had seen before. The U.S. Phantom. Construction began 6 months ago in a hidden facility on the far side of the moon. We need you to finish it, Alan. Alan studied the design, his engineer's mind already spotting problems, finding solutions. The crew would be completely cut off. No communications in or out while the field is active. They know the risks, Admiral Klein said. And if it works? Alan asked. What then? Admiral Klein's face hardened. Then humanity gets a fighting chance. The Concordat mocks us, restricts us, takes our colonies. They think we're weak. Olivia stepped forward. We're not weak. We're just quiet. Alan looked between the two women, then back at the ship design. Slowly, he nodded. I'll need a team. The best engineers we have. You'll get them, Admiral Klein promised. How long do we have? Alan asked. Admiral Klein's expression grew serious. Intelligence suggests the Concordat plans to put Earth under protection within 3 years. After that, we'll be trapped in our own solar system. Ellen took a deep breath. Then we'd better get to work. Captain Frank Harrison looked at the 38 men and women seated before him. They filled the small briefing room on the lunar base. The air smelled recycled and stale. The lights buzzed overhead. But Frank barely noticed these things now. After 6 months of training, the moon felt almost like home. Welcome to your final briefing, Frank said. His voice was deep and steady. Tomorrow, we board the U.S. Phantom. Behind him, a screen showed an image of their ship. It was unlike any vessel Earth had built before. The black hull absorbed light rather than reflected it. No windows broke its smooth surface. It looked more like a shadow than a ship. "You all know why you're here," Frank continued. "You were chosen from thousands of candidates. You're the best Earth has to offer." He looked around the room. Some faces showed excitement, others fear. All showed determination. "For everyone outside this room, we don't exist. Your families think you're on a mining mission to the outer solar system. Some of your records show you died in training accidents." Lieutenant Maria Diaz raised her hand. She was small but strong, with quick eyes that missed nothing. As tactical officer, she would be responsible for the ship's few weapons. "Sir, what happens if the pocket dimension fails during transit?" Frank looked at Science Officer Kevin Washington. Kevin stood up, his tall frame unfolding from the chair. "If the displacement field fails while active," Kevin explained, "we would instantly appear in normal space. Our energy signature would be detected immediately. And if that happens in Concordat territory," Maria pressed, "then we'd have about 30 seconds before their automated defense systems lock onto us," Kevin said. "Maybe less." Navigation Officer Samantha Reeves spoke next. She had short blonde hair and hands that never seemed to stay still. "So we just have to trust that this experimental tech won't fail while we're hiding in the heart of enemy territory." "Great." Frank stepped forward. "That's exactly what we have to do. Because if we fail, Earth becomes nothing more than a protected zoo for the amusement of the Concordat." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what was at stake. Frank moved to a different screen showing a map of Concordat space. "Our mission has 3 parts. First, we gather intelligence on Concordat fleet movements and capabilities. Second, we place quantum beacons at key locations to map their defense networks. Third, and most important, we locate and disable the prototype of the protection field they plan to use on Earth." Engineer Paul Garcia raised his hand. "Captain, how long can we maintain the displacement field?" "At maximum power, 14 days, Frank answered. "But we'll need to drop out of displacement regularly to vent heat and recharge. Dr. Martinez recommends no more than 72 hours of continuous displacement." Security Chief Victor Martinez stood next to Frank. "We've identified several locations in Concordat space where we can safely drop displacement without detection. Gas giants, asteroid fields, dark nebulae." Frank looked around the room again. "Any other questions?" Communications Officer Diane Lewis spoke up. "Sir, what if we're discovered? What are our orders then?" Frank's face grew serious. "Our primary mission is intelligence gathering, not combat. But if we're discovered, we don't run. We fight." He tapped a control, and the image on the screen changed to show Earth, beautiful and blue. "The Concordat thinks we're weak. They think we're primitive. They laugh at our technology. They'll stop laughing when the Phantom appears in their home systems." Frank straightened his shoulders. "We leave tomorrow at 600. Get some rest. It's a long journey to Zithran space." As the crew filed out, Kevin stayed behind. "They're scared," he said quietly to Frank. "Good," Frank replied. "Fear keeps you sharp. And where we're going, we need to be very sharp indeed." Kevin nodded and left. Frank stood alone in the briefing room, looking at the image of Earth on the screen. "We won't let them cage you," he whispered. The U.S. Phantom moved away from the lunar dock in complete silence. No engines flared, no lights blinked. One moment it was there, connected to the hidden base on the dark side of the moon. The next moment it was gone, sliding into its pocket of folded space-time. Inside the bridge, the crew worked in near silence. The soft beep of computers and the low hum of air systems were the only sounds. Captain Frank Harrison sat in the command chair, watching the main screen as Earth grew smaller behind them. "Displacement field stable," Engineer Paul Garcia reported from his station. His fingers moved quickly over the controls. "Power consumption at 82% of maximum." Frank nodded. "Status of heat sinks." "Operating within normal range," Paul replied. "But we'll need to drop out of displacement within 70 hours to vent accumulated heat." Science Officer Kevin Washington looked up from his console. I've plotted 3 potential locations where we can safely drop displacement for heat venting. The rings of Saturn offer the best cover. Frank studied the star map displayed on a side screen. Plot a course. We'll make our first stop there, then head for the edge of the solar system. The Phantom accelerated, completely invisible to any watching eyes. No radar could detect it. No light reflected from its surface. It moved through the solar system like a ghost. Communications Officer Diane Lewis monitored the frequencies used by Earth's defense network. All Earth sensors show negative for our presence. The displacement field is working perfectly. Almost too perfectly, Samantha Reeves muttered from the navigation console. It's like we don't exist. Kevin smiled slightly. That's exactly the point. 12 hours later, the Phantom hid within Saturn's rings. The displacement field powered down, and the ship's heat sinks extended, venting the accumulated thermal energy into the cold space around them. Frank stood in the observation room, watching ice particles bounce harmlessly off the Phantom's hull. The rings of Saturn stretched out before him, glowing in the distant sunlight. Lieutenant Maria Diaz joined him. Beautiful, isn't it? Frank nodded. And a perfect hiding place. The ice and dust hide our thermal signature. Maria's face grew serious. I've been analyzing the Concordat defense patterns based on our intelligence. They concentrate their forces along established jump routes between stars. But they leave the areas between those routes almost unguarded. Because conventional drives are too slow to make those routes practical, Frank said. Maria smiled. But our displacement drive doesn't care about distance in the same way. We can go where they don't expect us. Frank turned to her. Plot me a course that avoids all known Concordat patrol routes. Already done, sir. Back on the bridge, Diane Lewis listened to intercepted Concordat communications. Her face showed surprise as she turned to Frank. Captain, I'm picking up a Zithran military channel. They're talking about us. Frank frowned. Have we been detected? No, sir, Diane said. They're discussing human technology in general. Listen. She played the translated audio through the bridge speakers. The harsh Zithran language had been converted to a flat, computerized voice. The humans remain confined to their home system. Their attempts at faster-than-light travel are primitive at best. At current rates of development, they are at least 50 years from developing technology that could challenge even our civilian vessels. Another voice responded. Then the protection plan proceeds on schedule. The humans will never know what hit them. Laughter followed. Frank looked around at his crew. All had stopped to listen. All now stared at him. They think we're stuck in our own solar system, he said quietly. Let them keep thinking that. He turned to navigation. Samantha, take us out. Maximum displacement. Next stop, the edge of Concordat space. The Phantom's displacement field activated once more. The ship vanished from Saturn's rings, leaving no trace it had ever been there. In the vast darkness between stars, where no one ever looked, the invisible ship carried its human crew toward enemy territory. Their journey had truly begun. 3 weeks passed as the Phantom traveled through Concordat space. The journey was slow because they had to drop out of displacement regularly to vent heat and recharge. Each time, they hid near gas giants or in dense asteroid fields where sensors couldn't find them. Now they hovered silently in the upper atmosphere of Zith-3, the industrial moon orbiting the Zithran homeworld. Captain Frank stood at the observation window, looking down at the massive factories spread across the moon's surface. The displacement field had been modified to bend light around the ship, making it invisible to eyes, but slightly more detectable to advanced sensors. We need to stay above this level in the atmosphere, Kevin warned. Any lower in the air pressure might create a visible disturbance. Frank nodded. How long until the infiltration team is ready? 30 minutes, Security Chief Victor answered from behind them. He wore a black stealth suit that seemed to swallow light. We're making final adjustments to our equipment. Lieutenant Maria joined them at the window, pointing to a large complex in the distance. That's our target. The main research facility where they're building the protection field generators for Earth. Frank studied the complex. It was heavily guarded, with patrol ships coming and going every few minutes. Their security is tight, but all facing outward, Maria noted. They're watching for ships coming from space, not for one already inside their perimeter. Victor checked his weapons. My team will place quantum disruptors at 3 key points in the facility. If we're successful, their protection field technology will be set back years. And if you're detected? Frank asked. Victor's face showed no emotion. Then we fight our way back to the extraction point. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Frank turned to Victor. Remember, this is not a combat mission unless absolutely necessary. We're here to disable their technology and gather intelligence, not start a war. And if they spot us? Victor asked. Then, Frank said grimly, we show them exactly what humanity is capable of. An hour later, Victor and his team of 5 moved silently through the Zithran research facility. Their stealth suits, combined with the Phantom's sensor disruption field, made them nearly invisible to the Zithran security systems. The aliens worked in the facility, completely unaware of the human intruders. The Zithrans were tall with gray skin and 4 eyes. They moved with a grace that seemed strange in such large creatures. Victor's team placed the first quantum disruptor in the main power center, the small device attached to the wall, its light blinking once before going dark. First package placed, Victor whispered into his comm unit. On the Phantom, Frank acknowledged. Good work. Proceed to the second location. Meanwhile, Kevin and Maria had hacked into the Zithran computer network from the ship. Information flowed into the Phantom's database. Detailed files on Concordat military capabilities, defense systems, and technologies the humans had never seen before. This is incredible, Kevin said, watching the data stream. With this information, Earth can develop countermeasures to everything the Concordat has. Maria smiled. And they have no idea we're taking it. In the facility below, Victor's team encountered their first problem. The Zithran security officers stood directly in their path to the second target location. They couldn't proceed without being seen. We need a distraction, Victor whispered to his team. One of his team members, Susan, moved to a nearby control panel. With careful movements, she rewired a connection, causing alarms to sound in a distant part of the facility. The Zithran guard hurried away to investigate, leaving their path clear. Clever, Victor said. Let's move. They reached the second location, the main research lab where the protection field generators were being built. Victor placed the second disruptor beneath a worktable, hidden from sight. Second package placed, he reported. In the Phantom, Frank watched the operation through the team's helmet cameras. Everything was going according to plan. Perhaps too well. Stay alert, he warned Victor. I don't like how easy this has been. As if on cue, a new alarm sounded in the facility. Not the one Susan had triggered, but something else. Something worse. Captain, Diane called urgently from communications. The Zithrans are activating emergency protocols. They know something's wrong. Alarms blared throughout the Zithran facility. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Victor and his team pressed themselves against the walls as Zithran security forces ran past, their heavy footsteps shaking the floor. What happened? Frank demanded from the Phantom. Did they spot you? Negative. Victor whispered into his comm. They're responding to something else. On the Phantom's bridge, Diane listened carefully to the Zithran emergency channels. Her eyes widened. Captain, they've detected an anomaly in their computer network. They know someone is stealing data. Frank turned to Kevin and Maria. Shut it down. Now. Kevin's fingers flew across his console. Too late. They've traced the connection back to our general area. They can't see us, but they know something is here. In the Zithran High Command Center, Security Chief Xaltor rushed to the main display. All 4 of his eyes were wide with alarm. Impossible, he shouted to the gathered commanders. Our sensors show unauthorized access to the weapons database, but there are no intruders on any security cameras. A younger officer approached. Could it be a system malfunction? In 3 separate systems simultaneously. Cultor hissed. No. We are under attack. Lock down all research data and deploy atmospheric scanners. Something is hiding in our airspace. Back in the research facility, Victor made a quick decision. Change of plans. We'll place the last disruptor on our way out. His team moved faster now, no longer trying to avoid all detection. Speed had become more important than perfect stealth. They reached the 3rd location, the prototype chamber where the first protection field generator was being assembled. Victor placed the final quantum disruptor directly on the generator itself. 3rd package placed, heading to extraction point. As they turned to leave, a door slid open. 3 Zithran scientists entered, stopping in shock at the sight of the humans. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the scientists reached for an alarm panel. Susan fired her stun weapon. The scientist dropped to the floor. The other 2 turned to run, but Victor and another team member stunned them before they could escape. We've been seen, Victor reported, moving to extraction point at maximum speed. On the Phantom, Frank made a decision. Prepare for emergency extraction. Warm up the engines. We may need to make a fast exit. Lieutenant Maria looked up from her console. Sir, if we power up the engines while still in displacement, the field could collapse. I know, Frank said, but I won't leave our people down there. In the High Command Center, the atmospheric scanners began to detect unusual heat patterns in the sky above the research facility. There's something there, Coulter said, pointing at the blurry readings. Something big, but it's barely there, like a ghost. Impossible, one of the commanders said. No ship can hide from our sensors. Apparently, Coulter said grimly. Someone forgot to tell that to whoever is up there. Victor's team reached the extraction point, a flat roof on the edge of the facility. They signaled the Phantom. Ready for pickup, Victor reported, breathing hard from the run. Frank nodded to his pilot. Take us down. The Phantom descended, still cloaked in its displacement field. The field flickered slightly as the engines strained against the atmosphere. On the sensors in the High Command Center, the ghost image became slightly clearer. Target defense systems on that area. Coulter ordered. We can't fire at an unconfirmed target. A commander protested. It could be a sensor malfunction. Coulter slammed his fist down. It is not a malfunction. On the roof, Victor and his team watched as the Phantom appeared, its displacement field partially disabled to allow them to board. The ship hovered just above the roof, a loading ramp extending. Move, Victor shouted. His team sprinted for the ramp. In the High Command Center, the sensors suddenly showed a clear image, a ship unlike any the Zithrans had seen before. What is that? A commander gasped. Coulter stared at the image in disbelief. It's human. That's impossible. Another commander said. Human ships can't penetrate our defenses. They can't even leave their own system undetected. As Victor's team boarded the Phantom, Frank made another decision. He opened a communication channel to the Zithran command frequency. This is Captain Frank Harrison of Earth, he said, his voice calm and clear. You believed us technologically inferior. That belief ends today. 1 month later, Commander Lisa Frost stood once again before the Concordat Council. This time, the amphitheater felt different. No one laughed. No one mocked. The aliens watched her with new eyes filled with caution and, in some cases, fear. Ambassador Krezoth no longer towered over her on the platform. Instead, they stood as equals. The Concordat Council has reconsidered its position regarding Earth and its colonies, Krezoth said. His voice lacked its former confidence. We propose a mutual defense and non-interference treaty. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. That's quite a change from putting us under your protection, Ambassador. Krezoth's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of discomfort. Lisa had learned. New information has come to light. he said carefully. Information suggesting that humanity may have certain technological capabilities that warrant a reassessment. The Drovian representative leaned forward from his seat. We are particularly curious about how a human ship penetrated the most advanced defense network in the galaxy without detection, and then vanished again, added a representative from another species. Lisa kept her face neutral. I'm not authorized to discuss specific military capabilities. In orbit high above the Concordat homeworld, the U.S. Phantom maintained its silent watch. Its displacement field was active, making it completely invisible to the massive sensor arrays that frantically scanned for any sign of the Earth vessel. On the bridge, Captain Frank and his crew monitored the negotiations through an encrypted channel. They're scared, Kevin observed. They thought they knew everything about us. Now they realize they know nothing. Frank nodded. Fear can be useful. It makes enemies cautious. His console beeped softly. A message from Lisa appeared. Treaty negotiations proceeding favorably. Your presence remains our most persuasive argument. Frank allowed himself a rare smile. It seems they're not laughing anymore. Back in the council chamber, the negotiations continued. The terms had shifted dramatically in Earth's favor. All Concordat forces will withdraw from the 3 human colonies they occupied, Lisa stated. Earth will maintain a demilitarized zone along the border, as will the Concordat. Agreed, Krezoth said, without arguing. And what guarantees do we have that human stealth ships won't infiltrate our territories again? The same guarantees we have that you won't try to put us under your protection again, Lisa replied evenly. The message was clear. Mutual fear would keep the peace. After the session ended, Lieutenant Jack Palmer joined Lisa as they walked back to their quarters. Do you think they'll honor the treaty? He asked quietly. Lisa nodded. As long as they believe we can appear anywhere, at any time, without warning. The Phantom changed everything. Speaking of the Phantom, Jack said, I received word from Earth. They've approved construction of 3 more ships with displacement technology. Lisa smiled. Good. One mysterious ship keeps them nervous. A fleet of them will keep them honest. That night, as the Phantom prepared to return to Earth, Frank made one last circuit of his ship. The crew was tired but proud. They had changed the course of human history without firing a single shot. In the observation room, Frank found Kevin staring out at the stars. Thinking about home? Frank asked. Thinking about them. Kevin replied, gesturing toward the Concordat world below. They've been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy for centuries. They forgot what it's like to be surprised. Humanity has always been good at surprising others, Frank said. And ourselves. The Phantom's engines hummed as it prepared to engage its displacement drive for the journey home. Frank sent one final message to Lisa on the planet below. Mission accomplished. Returning to Earth. The door is now open. As the displacement field activated, the Phantom vanished once more. Below, on the Concordat homeworld, alarm systems briefly detected something in orbit. A ghost, a shadow, a whisper of something that shouldn't be there. Then it was gone, leaving the Concordat leaders to wonder just how many more human ships might be watching them, invisible and silent, at this very moment. The laughter had stopped. A new age had begun.